Seems like with the Royal Rumble pay-per-view in recent years, the WWE has been on sort of an up and down path with the Royal Rumble pay-per-views. If you go back and look at pay-per-views like the Royal Rumble in 2005, you may argue that the show was one of the best Royal Rumble pay-per-views of all time, and in my opinion, it was a really damn good show. Then the WWE followed up with two forgettable Royal Rumble pay-per-views in both 2006 and 2007. Immediately following that, you get three really good Royal Rumble pay-per-views, and in the case of 2008 and 2009, you can argue that those two belong in the top five Royal Rumble pay-per-views of all time. And while you may get some opposition on that, I might stand by that, especially in the case of the 2009 Rumble. 2010 Rumble was a pretty good show as well. I wouldn't classify that show being better than 2008, and especially not better than 2009. But that string of Royal Rumble pay-per-views was really damn good, and we'll start things off with the 2008 Royal Rumble. 2008 Royal Rumble pay-per-view, the WWE decided to hold it in Madison Square Garden in New York City. That's always a good thing. That's always a positive. You know that when the WWE goes to MSG, whether it be an episode of Raw or a smaller pay-per-view or a big pay-per-view like a Royal Rumble, that it's going to feel like a big deal. It's going to feel like a big show. So kudos to the WWE for having it there. I personally think that the Garden should have at least one pay-per-view a year, whether that would be a Big Four show or a smaller show, because again, it elevates that particular show, because you're holding it in Madison Square Garden with all of the history of the WWE in that building. But in terms of the Royal Rumble pay-per-view itself, I like how it was presented. Obviously, the commentators sold it well. They sold it like it was a pretty big deal, not only it being in New York City, but it being the road to WrestleMania. I thought that in terms of a set, since you were in the Garden, you needed to have some sort of unique set, and it reminded me kind of like the old school WWE sets where you didn't really need anything big and fancy. All you needed was a stage and a ring, and that's pretty much all it was. And that's pretty much all you need sometimes. Sometimes KISS, keep it simple, stupid, is the way to go, and I'm not really going to deny that. In terms of the matches, you kicked off with this career-threatening match between Ric Flair and MVP. And this storyline was always one of my favorites. And the reason why is because it was meant to elevate the profile of some of the guys facing Ric Flair, like MVP and Mr. Kennedy. And even though it ultimately did not, I did like the fact that the WWE was at least trying. And even though the matches with Ric Flair seemed very predictable, you knew he wasn't going to win until you you knew he wasn't going to lose until you got to WrestleMania 24. It was kind of obvious. But this match was a very, very solid match to open up the Royal Rumble pay-per-view. Again, if you talk about some positives about the Royal Rumble, one of the biggest positives, especially in recent years, was that the opening match has seemed to always deliver, other than that one rare exception. For me personally, the rare exception would be, let's say, 2015. I don't even remember what that match was. But you kind of get my drift, especially in the last couple of Rumbles. The quality has seemed to go down. But when I look back at 2008, 2009, 2010, you can even say 2011, that the opening match on the card was really good, and this is a prime example of that. Ric Flair versus MVP was a good match to sit through. It's a good match to go back and watch, to be honest. You get another solid match immediately following this with Chris Jericho facing JBL. Even though the match, you can make an argument, wasn't really the best of the night, you may argue it being the worst of the night, it was still good enough to get by. And it was definitely a better feud than the one you were going to have the year after with JBL and Shawn Michaels. A pretty solid match. I'll say it was solid. It wasn't great. It was solid. Then you get to, in my opinion, the match of the night, and it was a really damn good match. Edge and Rey Mysterio for the World Heavyweight Championship. Going into it, I really didn't have any sort of feeling that Rey was going to win this match. It seemed set in stone that Edge was going to win, and Edge was obviously going to get the big rub at WrestleMania for him to face The Undertaker in the main event, which I was perfectly fine with. But this match was really damn good. I liked the chemistry that these guys have. I always have. Very, very good world title match at a Big Four pay-per-view. Then you follow it up with another solid world title match. The only thing I didn't really like about this match is, while the World Heavyweight Championship match seemed predictable, this match really seemed predictable. And it was Randy Orton versus Jeff Hardy. Mike Adamle, I mean, come on, dude, come on. Thank God Mike Adamle is no longer in the WWE. But Randy Orton is facing Jeff Hardy for the WWE Championship. I like the fact that WWE was starting to put Jeff Hardy in this bigger role in this main event type of scene. He's always had the talent for it. He's always had the uniqueness. He's always stood out from the crowd, whether that be in his wrestling ability or just in his look. You can say that he doesn't really have a lot of charisma. To me, he kind of showcases that in his look and in his style. So I'll give him that. This match was solid enough to get by. I really liked the finish of countering the twist of fate into an RKO. I thought that was a really well done setup. And again, it was a good world title match at a Big Four pay-per-view. And then you get to the Royal Rumble match itself. And the same problem with the two world title matches is once the number 30 entrant came out, you automatically knew the direction the WWE was going to go. But that really isn't a bad thing, because you still had that big surprise element of John Cena, who wasn't even supposed to be back until late 2008, August, maybe even September of 2008. And here he is, coming back only a couple of months after suffering a really terrible injury of tearing his pec. And it set up a really cool moment, him entering at number 30 and him tossing out Triple H to win the Royal Rumble. Now, obviously, looking at this match, you had some standouts. Obviously, the big stare down between Roddy Piper and Jimmy Snuka. I was about to say Ricky Steamboat for some reason, but you had Piper and Snuka here in Madison Square Garden, just like old school days. And you had a moment in the Royal Rumble where the action stopped, where even the biggest of superstars like The Undertakers and the Batistas stopped what they were doing to watch this face-off. It's almost like you went back in time and it brought you back to this great iconic moment. And I thought that this was really well done. And then obviously you had some other surprise entrants in there. I believe Mick Foley was a surprise entrant. You had that stupid crap with Hornswoggle, whatever. But you had some guys stand out. John Morrison definitely stood out in his performance. He went a really long time, which was very good. Batista lasted a while. Obviously, Undertaker and Shawn Michaels. I like the storytelling element that they did there. Them being the final two in the previous Royal Rumble. Well, here in the 2008 Royal Rumble, they're the first two. You're pretty much getting a rematch from the year before, which was really, really well done. And like I said, you may knock the finish, but I love the finish. It's set up for a really cool moment. Unfortunately, it's set up for a really crappy WrestleMania match where Triple H did not belong in there, and John Cena didn't really belong in there either because he gave up the Rumble spot at the No Way Out pay-per-view. But whatever the case may be, 2008 Royal Rumble, really damn good. I recommend going back and watching it. That's all I pretty much have to say.